So let's just do a few minutes meditation on the breath. So try to sit in your best meditation posture. The main thing is to keep your back straight. And bring your mind inside, away from external distractions, the objects of the 5 physical senses. And also try to keep your mind away from internal distraction, mainly the discursive mind. Don't get distracted or caught up with the billions of thoughts that race through your head. And find your breath where it goes out and comes in, so focusing at the entrance of your nostrils. So that's the focus of your concentration, right there. So then generate a strong determination to focus on your breath like that without allowing yourself to become distracted by anything whatsoever. Generate that strong determination. And then put your mind on the breath there and keep it there. keep your mind on your breath. So if you've done this meditation effectively, your mind should be a little calmer and clearer than it was before. So now look into your mind and check your motivation for being here this morning. Ask yourself, why did I come to the centre today? If you find that your reason for being here is simply something to do with the happiness or comfort of this life, just trying to benefit this life alone without thinking of future lives, without thinking of anything beyond this life, then recognize that motivation is being rooted in attachment. Attachment, the mind that seeks only the comfort and happiness of this life. And think that by following attachment, we leave imprints on our consciousness, negative imprints on our consciousness, that sooner or later will ripen like seeds, will ripen into suffering of one sort or another in this life or in future lives. So even though all we want is happiness and comfort, because we don't recognize the evolution of karma, because we think contributory causes are principal causes. Even though we want happiness and comfort, we constantly run to create the causes of suffering that we don't want. So especially when we're trying to do a Dharma action, which we should try and make it positive. So if you find the negative motivation, motivation of attachment, is what brought you here, then recognize it, discard it, and replace it with a positive motivation. Motivation that looks beyond this life. Motivation that recognizes that this life is very short and the future is infinite. And right now, it's in our own hands whether that infinite future is good or bad. And in many ways it all comes down to motivation. So generate a positive motivation, briefly thinking like this. The purpose of my life is to free all sentient beings from suffering and lead them to enlightenment. In order to do that, I first have to reach enlightenment myself. And to do that, I have to actualize the path, the entire path to enlightenment. That depends on practicing the path, and knowing how to practice the path depends on studying the teachings on the path to enlightenment, the Lamrim, stages of the path to enlightenment. And it all begins with the teachings on the Perfect Human Rebirth, which is the topic of our study this morning. So think, I'm going to study the teachings on Perfect Human Rebirth as a first step on the path to enlightenment, which I'm going to attain for the sole purpose of enlightening all sentient beings. So in that way, generate the highest possible motivation, when we call bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta. So if we can make this action of being here this morning and all our actions, if we can motivate all these actions, even our daily life actions, eating, sleeping, working, talking, walking, driving, whatever we do, with bodhicitta, then our whole life becomes a cause of enlightenment, not just for ourselves, but for all sentient beings. Thank you. Anyone here for the first time ever? Okay. Anybody here last week?
See it? Say here?
Yeah. So what did we talk about last week?
The rebirth. The precious rebirth.
Sure.
How it's precious and how it's to be in this rebirth is so spectacular than to be in a hell run.
Okay.
That's the best way I can sum it up.
All right. So anyway, as I mentioned before, that this last Sunday, this Sunday, next when shall I get back?
Tuesday.
Yeah, so our regular teacher, Geshe Tinley, gets back on Tuesdays. So actual teachings will resume next week. But in the meantime, so the stimulus for this 2 weeks is this new book by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Perfect Human Rebirth. So, as I explained last week, the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive is producing a series of commentaries on the Lam Rim by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, in-depth commentary drawn from his 4 decades of teaching this subject to Westerners. So, we've taken all the teachings that have been recorded and transcribed, and there are thousands of pages, and each we've sort of electronically chopped them up and thrown them into topic baskets: Perfect Human Rebirth, Impermanence and Death, 3 Lower Realms, Refuge, Karma, and so on, following the Lam Rim outline of Tabonka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, which Geshe-la's teaching on Sunday mornings. He's been teaching for 2 or 3 years now?
It's been a long time.
Yeah. It's going to be a long time. That's good. You need to study these teachings in depth, So Lama Zopa Rinpoche has been teaching the Lam Rim to Westerners since the late 60s, actually. But we only started recording the teachings in 72 or 73, something like that. So, so then once all the teachings on each relevant topic have been sort of put into this basket, then the editors go through each basket, following the outline of Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, and put everything Rinpoche said on each, according to each heading, subheading, sub-subheading there, and then comb through and smooth it out and make sure nothing's omitted, and also all the repetitions have been removed. So then it becomes like a complete teaching like this. So I don't know anything in English or even Tibetan that goes into each of the key Lam Rim topics in such depth, Maybe there's something I don't know about it. So the Lam Rim, this stages of the path to enlightenment is kind of the key course of study at this centre and all our related centres. So it's it's what we have to study and understand and meditate on and realize. So I think last week I briefly mentioned the overview of the Lam Rim and how the teachings came about. Also, that although we often say this is the first teaching on the Lam Rim, it's not actually the first teaching. Really, the first teaching is a teaching on Guru devotion, but generally, the lamas, especially for new students, don't sort of launch into teaching on Guru devotion because we're not sort of used to that idea in the West, and it might, I think as I also mentioned last week, it might put people off. They think, oh, this guy's just trying to get my money or something. If the lamas start teaching about how great the Guru is, and the Guru is a Buddha, and you have to be devoted to the Guru, and all the things which are true, but so usually they start with this. And then when we have a better understanding of the Buddha's teachings, then our minds is a little more open to receiving teachings on Guru devotion. But in the outline of the Lam Rim, the teaching on Guru devotion is called the root of the path. So right there it shows how important the teaching is. It's like the root of the plant or a tree is the most important part, really. If you don't have a healthy root, you don't have a healthy plant. So we need to find the Guru and learn to develop that relationship in a positive way. So then once we've developed that relationship, then either way the Lam Rim is structured, then it goes on to having become devoted, then next comes the teaching on the Perfect Human Rebirth, and then after that comes the teaching on how to extract the essence from the Perfect Human Rebirth. And that's then when the main rest of the Lam Rim is explained, in the three scopes, three levels of capability of the practitioner. So basically the goals of those three levels, or those three scopes, the first level is to make sure you get a good future rebirth, and the next scope is to attain liberation from all of cyclic existence, and then the goal of the third scope is complete enlightenment. So we have to follow that path in that kind of correct order. So the first couple of teachings are, the teaching on Perfect Human Rebirth is given in order for us to recognize what we have, because most of us don't. So it's explained in great detail, and we have to study and think about those teachings to realize what a precious opportunity, what a rare, precious opportunity it is that we have now. And then the next teaching is the teaching on impermanence and death. It says that we've got this incredible opportunity, but it's finishing rapidly. It's probably more than half over already, and certainly in my case. And we never know when it's going to come to an end. So we should wake up and not waste a moment of it. So really these two, because the path is long and we can encounter many obstacles along it, and we're easily distracted. We need to have a lot of energy for studying and following the path, and a lot of motivation to get to the end, to get to enlightenment. And so this meditation on the perfect human birth and the next one on impermanence and death are really like rocket fuel. If we fill up now, then it'll be easier for us to go the whole way. And this teaching, particularly on perfect human rebirth, it's not just that it's, fuel with an eye to the long distant future, but it has many immediate benefits. I mean, I think we find that, we get, sometimes we feel lonely, or we get bored, or we can feel a little lost or directionless, or we have low self-esteem. People even kill themselves. I mean, this teaching right now is an antidote to all that and more. Because we haven't arrived here out of the blue. This is part of our evolution, and we, in previous lives, created the cause of this life. So, if we're to honour all the hard work that we did in previous lives, bringing ourselves here, we should recognise why we brought ourselves here, what our intention was then for this life, and not get lost in all the superficial distractions that surround us. And by knowing what we did then that brought us here, we know what we should do now to give us similar opportunities in future lives. Because it's pretty unlikely that we're going to attain liberation or enlightenment in this lifetime. Speaking personally, anyway. Pretty unlikely. And also, as I mentioned last time, that if even to realise the perfect human rebirth, to have realisation of these teachings, the first step on the path is would be a wonderful thing if we could do that. So in order to continue the work that we started in previous lives and that we hopefully will continue in this life, then we need similar opportunities in future lives, future perfect human rebirths. So by knowing what brought us here, we know what to do to create this opportunity for ourselves in the future. And that's one of the benefits of this perfect human rebirth. So the way the teaching on perfect human rebirth is set up, there are three main divisions. First is recognizing what is a perfect human rebirth, and then second is seeing how greatly useful it is, how greatly meaningful it is, and what we can do with it. And then third is seeing how hard it will be to find again. So the perfect human rebirth is a human rebirth that's has two sets of attributes. It's here in the subtitle, freedom and richness. 8 freedoms and 10 richnesses. Now there's some overlap between the freedoms and richnesses, but they're coming at the topic from 2 different points of view. One is what we don't have, what we're free of. You know, the unfree state, the 8 unfree states that make it very difficult, if not impossible, to practice Dharma. And then the 10 richnesses, or sometimes called endowments, things that we've received. Of course, received not as a gift from God, but something that we've actually created the cause of ourselves in previous lives, and the fruits of that hard labour have ripened in this life. So 10 endowments, or 10 results, the causes of which we actually created ourselves. 10 richnesses that make it possible or easier for us to practice Dharma. So it's all about practicing Dharma. So the 8 freedoms are divided kind of into 2. There are 4 non-human freedoms and 4 human freedoms. So does anybody know what the 4 non-human freedoms are?
Born in hell, born as a hungry ghost.
Freedom from
Freedom from
birth in hell.
Freedom from birth as a hungry ghost.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom from
Hungry
birth as an animal, and freedom from birth as a long-living God.
Long life God. Yeah. So those are the 4 non-human freedoms. You knew that one? Then what are the 4, since you're on a roll?
The 4 human ones, it's not being born in a barbarian region, not being born in a place where the teachings have not reached, not being born in a place where you don't have, or being born as a person who don't have the faculties to actually learn the teachings, and the last one, not being born with wrong views.
Right. So basically not being born in the wrong place, the wrong time, with the wrong kind of body, or with the wrong kind of mind, you can say. And, as we look around, we can't, at the moment we can't directly perceive the hell realms, or the hungry ghost realms, or the God realms. The animal realm we can see. And the examples of this human situation we can easily see. There are a lot of places where there's no Dharma, so there's no Dharma around you, then you can't practice. We're living in a time where the teachings exist on earth, so we're not so we have that freedom, but it's the question of place, and then physically, I think we have the freedom of not being disabled in one way or another that would prevent us from practicing Dharma, and the mental one. We see so many examples of where the people wouldn't be freed to study and practice Dharma for, just because of the nature of their family or the society that they're in. The there are some, a lot of people who question, especially new students, but even older students, even some Dharma teachers, so-called Dharma teachers, who would question the existence of, like, the hell realm, for example. A lot of people come into Buddhism from Christianity, say, and a lot of people there think, well, hell doesn't really exist, it's just a way of frightening people into towing the party line, Does anybody here have doubts about the existence of the hell realms? Oh, okay. What?
Since you're touching on the topic, I mean, I kind of vacillate between the actual existence of the hell realms. I mean, the teachings go into quite distinct description of what happens in each of the various levels of how you're ripped apart, you're reborn, etc., etc. And then there's a other flip side. Maybe it's getting a little bit down another path of how they ultimately don't exist.
Well,
Unless I've got that all
ultimately
wrong.
something else, but we're
Okay.
we're talking here on a conventional,
Okay.
relative level, Ultimately, we don't exist either, so
Right.
it doesn't help a lot at this point. So what was the first point?
I'm kind of in the same camp as a couple of other people in here. I kind of go back and forth as to the existence of.
Yeah, so Lama Yeshe used to say, hell isn't sort of a place that's over there waiting for you to, go to your travel agent and buy a ticket for there or something. It's not an actual place somewhere waiting for us, And I think that part of the difficulty is in accepting or understanding the reality of that kind of existence that is described in excruciating detail in several texts. And, there will be a subsequent book devoted to the topic, the three lower realms. Part of the difficulty is that we think this is real. So we think that is, the hell realm should also be real in the way that we consider, this world real. And what's hard to understand is that what we see doesn't really exist in the way it appears. It's a projection of our own mind. I don't know about you, for me that's kind of really hard to get my mind around, because it feels so real. In fact, what we're experiencing now is what Lama Zopa Rinpoche calls a karmic appearance. We have the karma, obviously, to be being born human, and to have the human experience through the senses that we have and the mind that we have. So when our previous life died, and then we were born into this life, we had the karmic appearance of a human existence. When this life finishes and our mind leaves this body and continues into the next life, we don't know what the karmic appearance of that next life will be. If we have the karma to be born in one of the hells, then our mind will take an appropriate body, and our experience will be an appropriate one of, the various the 8 hot hells, or the 8 cold hells, or the 4 neighbouring hells that are described in the teachings. So the karmic appearance, at death, the karmic appearance of this life stops. And then the karmic appearance of the next life arises. So that can be a good way of thinking about what's going on in terms of karmic appearance. And as Shantideva, I can't remember the exact quote now, as Shantideva says in Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life, who created, describing a hot hell, who created the red hot burning ground, and who created the red hot houses and the terrifying, hell guardians and so on, that are described in the teachings. Who created them? Then he answers the question. He says the negative mind. They're created by the mind that is having that experience, not by some external agent, punishing us for mistakes we made, or belonging to the wrong religion or something like that. So just as we feel that this life is real, to beings born in other realms, they feel that life, that world, that karmic appearance is just as real. And, they suffer accordingly. I mean, part of the fortune of being human is that you can't suffer too much. Strange that may seem to some people, but our bodies are such that, we have there's a limit to how much suffering we can experience. Just beyond that, we die, it finishes. That's the karma of being human. If hell beings don't have that karma, there's no limit almost to the suffering that they can experience, and their bodies are constructed in such a way that they don't give out when pain and suffering reaches a certain level. We can see that reflected in a small way even here, where someone maybe burnt in a fire, and one person may die fairly quickly, the other person may linger for a long time with very painful injuries. Or some people with cancer die quickly, other people live for years with a lot of suffering and pain. Of course, still that's nothing compared to the hell realm, but it shows that, karma plays a part in how much you suffer in this life or in that life. Another thing that can be a bit of a hindrance in our accepting or understanding the hell realm experience. And also there's a little baggage, I think, that we bring with us calling it hell, because what we know about hell is generally what's taught by Christianity, isn't it? I guess I'm a bad Jew. Does anyone know? Does Judaism talk about hell? Hmm? They do?
In the Old Testament.
Yeah. What about Islam? Most of us, anyway, I think we have kind of this Christian idea of hell, and basically, most of us pretty much rejected it because no one could really explain it properly, and it just seemed like, a trick of the church to make you show up at least every Sunday. So, the Sanskrit word is narak, and the Tibetan word is nyalwa. Lama Zopa Rinpoche often used to use the Sanskrit word narak. Just because it had less baggage, fewer connotations from Christianity. So people were going around saying, "What the narak are you doing?" Anyway. One of the reasons that we also find it difficult to relate to it is because we tend to feel that our experience is reality, and our experience defines the limits of reality. Perhaps not intellectually, but somehow innately this is kind of what we feel, So that the happiness that we experience, or perhaps we see others experiencing, we feel is the limits of happiness, and the suffering that we experience, or see others suffering, is the limit of suffering. So it's in this kind of fairly narrow, actually, human range. And generally our experiences come, our experience of happiness or pleasure comes through our senses. We see nice things, we hear nice music, we taste nice food, we have nice smells, we enjoy nice touch, and they're opposites. We see things we don't like, we hear unpleasant sounds, there a lot of tastes we don't like, smells we don't like, a lot of touch we don't like. So these experiences come through our senses, yet our senses are actually, if we think about it, quite limited. What we see with our eyes, for example, is nowhere near what actually exists. I mean, we can't see through things. We can't see tiny things with our eyes, you can see with a microscope. We can't see long distances. So there are a lot of things that exist that are beyond our current visual perception. Then there's ultraviolet and infrared and all this other stuff. So, there's our eye organ and our eye consciousness are set up to experience within a fairly limited, range of frequencies. And the same thing with our hearing. We can't hear very high sounds, we can't hear very low sounds. So, just there with our eyes and ears, the experience of pleasure is limited by the limits of our senses. But what we hear and see doesn't define the visual and auditory objects that exist. So because our senses are so limited, but our happiness and suffering largely depend on them, so our happiness and suffering are also limited and don't define the limits of happiness and suffering. Another kind of being, another kind of body, we can experience more happiness and more suffering. So those kinds of bodies, shall we say, that can have these different kinds of experiences that we don't have are called, hell beings or hungry ghosts or gods. So, suffering, the range of suffering extends from the lowest hell to the high. Suffering starts at the lowest hell and happiness goes to the highest God realm. And so there's this whole range of suffering, transitioning into happiness. And we're just kind of here in the middle somewhere. And this is the human experience. Not too much, it's Goldilocks. So that's fortunate, because we can't suffer too much. Of course, we can't experience too much happiness either, but that's good, because it does become intoxicating. That's the disadvantage of being in the God realm. So when we, hear the teachings on these different things that are beyond our perception, like the hell realms, hungry ghosts, God realms, or even, past and future lives, we need to keep an open mind and not dismiss these things out of hand, as a lot of people do. And again, having an open mind is part of the perfect human rebirth. So with this teaching on perfect human rebirth, we study the different explanations of the 8 freedoms. And we read the teaching, and we think about it, and try and decide for ourselves, is this true or not? And, if it's true, imagine what it would be like to be reborn as a hell being. And when we meditate on it, on the experience, it's not like, we're watching it on TV. It's actually, we have to try and we put ourselves in that situation and try to feel what it would be like. This is not easy, but this is what we have to do. And how impossible, if we were born in that state, how impossible it would be to practice Dharma. I mean, if someone were, we're sitting here trying to meditate, and then someone's just got a stick of burning incense and poking us with it. And, okay, meditate. You can't. No way we can ignore that. That's just a tiny little stick of incense prodding us. So if we can't meditate with that, I mean, how can we meditate if, the whole world's on fire and we're caught up in it and we're experiencing our suffering but not dying? I mean, the only thing really in the mind is wanting it to stop, but it doesn't, and there's no end in sight. So impossible to practice that. That's one aspect of it. That's the main aspect of doing this meditation, think, how fortunate I am. That even now, how fortunate I am. So many times in previous lives I was born in that situation with no freedom to practice Dharma. But this time, I'm free from that terrible situation. And at the same time, there's also the thought that so many others are not free. So how fortunate I am to be free from that situation that I've been in myself so many times, and that so many others are in right now. So it also helps generate compassion for those who don't have this freedom. It's just so amazing to me how limited we are. I know there have been a few shows like on Nova and different TV programs about the universe and the Hubble telescope and all these billions and billions and billions of galaxies and things that they're finding now that, through modern astronomical technology. Anyone seen any of this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, basically what they're talking about is, this part of the universe that we're in, or the Milky Way, or maybe it's gone beyond the galaxy. I'm not quite sure about that. But even though they pointed one of these telescopes at an area of space that was empty, they thought there was nothing there. But as the technology was refined, they just see there's actually billions of galaxies where they thought there was nothing. So, the tininess of Earth is just, it's staggering. Yet, we feel it's like so big and real and important, you know what I mean? It's like... So our minds are very limited. So there are infinite worlds like this one throughout infinite space. And there are infinite sentient beings, and the vast majority are actually in the hell realms. And the reason for that is because being born having that karmic appearance, being born in the hell realm, however we term it, is a result of the cause. And the cause is very, very easy to create. It's a powerful cause. The cause generally is anger. Very easy to come up, Happens every day. So it's kind of the worst negative mind and the worst suffering result. Maybe it's more easy for attachment to arise than anger, but then, anger arises because of attachment. But anger is a more powerful mind, creates a stronger karmic imprint on our consciousness. It leaves a more easily ripeable seed. And attachment is largely a cause of hungry ghosts. So we have, three principal negative minds: ignorance, attachment, and aversion. So the result of anger, this is generally speaking, is rebirth in hell, attachment, hungry ghost, ignorance, animal. So those are the three lower realms that come from the three main poisonous minds, three main delusions. And the main experience of the hungry ghost realm, the main experience the hungry ghosts have, is that of hunger and thirst. So again, with us, if we don't have food for a certain period of time or water for a certain period of time, we'll die, because that's a strange way to put it, I suppose. That's the fortune of having a human body, though. It gives out before the suffering becomes. When the suffering reaches a certain point. With different karma, different body, it doesn't happen. It just gets worse and worse. And and it's not just the physical experience, which is bad enough, but the mental experience is worse. Of knowing there's no food, never knowing if it'll ever be found. I can't go into the details of the different realms now, but it's briefly explained in this book, and it is explained in more detail in other books also. What Geshe-la teaching now?
So Lama Rim.
Huh?
He's teaching us a Lama Rim at different station of the...
Yeah, which point has he reached, I was asking.
We
So
were
impermanence
talking
and
about
death?
death.
Okay, so three lower realms will come next, so you've got that to look forward to. In more ways than one. Anyway, if we miss one or two meals, and we're feeling hungry, it's very difficult even then for us to meditate. If we sit down and meditate and we're like really hungry, our mind, it's very hard to focus on the topic of meditation. The mind is always going to the kitchen. So, if we find it hard to meditate, to practice Dharma, when we're just a little hungry, missed a couple of meals, how about 100 years without food, 1,000 years without food? There's nothing else can come into your mind except trying to find something to eat or drink. So that's the experience of the hungry ghost. Many other experiences related to that. But frustration and disappointment and unfulfilled desire, the results of attachment and miserliness, lack of generosity, and the tightness of spirit, not wanting to give. So in most of our previous lives, we were reborn as hell beings. When we weren't born as hell beings, in most of those previous lives, we weren't born as hell beings, we were born as a hungry ghost. Again, because the cause is so easy to create. We create the cause hundreds, if not thousands of times a day, to be born as a hungry ghost. By being so strongly under the influence of our previous karmic habits, by not being aware or mindful of what's happening in our mind, not being aware of our motivation for every action that we do. So, as I said, our default position is to create negative karma. So it takes a lot of understanding. And we've been doing this since beginningless time. It's not like a new habit. It's an old habit. It's a beginningless habit. So it's hard to give up smoking after 20 years. How hard is it to give up attachment after beginningless time? So very easy to be born as a hungry ghost. And once we're a hungry ghost, impossible to practice Dharma.
So you're talking about all of the imprints that we're bringing with us into this life.
Mm-hmm.
Are we also bringing what we're learning here today, let's say, or in this lifetime? Are we at some point, when we're reborn again as a human, will we remember that, or will we have it still with us?
Do you remember your previous human lives?
I remember nothing.
So that probably answers your question. But we bring tendencies, even though we may not know where they came from. The main cause of being born, of this life that we have now, is in previous lives practicing Dharma, practicing morality. If you don't practice morality, which basically means avoiding creating negative karma, there's no way to be born in the upper realms. If you don't practice morality, if we create negative karma, the result of that is, if we follow attachment, ignorance, anger, we get born in the lower realms. If we practice morality, we practice generosity. So morality by itself isn't enough. We may be born in the upper as a human, for example, but we may be deprived. So we have to practice generosity as well. And then we also have to make pure prayers to be born human, or to attain liberation, or to attain enlightenment. If we make pure prayers, and pure means selfless, pray to reach enlightenment so that I can be of greatest benefit to all sentient beings. All the intermediate good results are accomplished. Or the cause of all the good results on the way are accomplished by the way. I mean, we can set our mind on a perfect human rebirth, and if we create the right, if we practice morality and generosity, and we make those pure prayers, that can be enough to bring us here. But if we pray for liberation or enlightenment, perfect human rebirth will come automatically. So we might as well set our sights on the ultimate goal, as remote and almost impossible sounding as it might seem. So the nature of karma is that we have these 4 kinds of karmic result. So there's throwing karma that ripened, that brought us into a human life. The throwing karma of human rebirth brought us into this life. Then in this life we experience the result similar to the cause. So the result similar to the cause in experience is that we have a fairly comfortable life. Through the practice of generosity, we find that we have sufficient means, like that. And the other result similar to the cause is the result similar to the cause in habit or tendency. So we have a tendency to practice morality, or to not kill, not steal, not lie. Even though every day we have hundreds of opportunities. I mean, if you look around, most people who aren't religious or who don't practice Dharma particularly, actually, most people have the opportunity to steal like something 100 times a day, but they don't. Why? It's not necessarily fear of getting caught. They have hundreds of opportunities a day to steal something without getting caught. People don't. This is kind of a karmic result. So, I think it was Lama Zopa who said, if you want to know what you did in the past, look at this life. And if you want to know what your future life's going to be, look at this life. So what we're experiencing in this life is an indication of what we did in the past, and what we do in this life is an indication of what our future life experience are going to be like. So, and then the 4th karmic result, the environmental result. So, we're born in a reasonably good environment here. There are a lot worse environments on Earth, even that we could have been born in, for example. So, we may not directly remember, but we can infer from what we're experiencing what we might have done. So that, to that extent, we can sort of remember what we did in previous lives. Is that getting to what you're asking? Or?
I think it is.
Tell me if it's not.
I think my question was coming at it from a different angle, and I think that angle maybe wasn't appropriate, in the sense that it was confused by something else. So I appreciate the answer that you gave.
Okay, well, think about it. If there's anything else, let me know.
With respect to the results similar to the cause and what we're experiencing in this life and what we're doing, reflecting our past life and then our future life. What does it mean when, in this life, we've had the experience of not practicing Dharma, and then we kind of go through the door and become introduced to it or meet the Dharma again, and then from there on out, we're practicing. What does that mean?
What does what mean?
What does it mean that point at which we meet the Dharma again in the present life?
Well, I think each of us has our own story,
Yeah.
about, and I mean, in looking back, in a way, the fact that we're all here, having come from where we came, it's like almost, it proves karma in a way, because there's nothing in our earlier life that would have suggested that we're going to be these like crazy Tibetan Buddhists, you know? I mean, you know, it's, and you know, I think each of us has our own story of how we got into it. I mean, in my case, it was that I was in Thailand, travelling around, you know, going to the beach, smoking dope, and listening to music, and eating and having a good time, and then being confronted in the environment by Buddhist monks and temples and statues and stuff, and wanting to find out more about the culture of this country that I was in, more as a dutiful tourist than as a spiritual seeker, you know. So I stole my first Dharma book, believe it or not. It's kind of this elaborate heist. So, well planned. I had my girlfriend distracted the shopkeeper. She's just, last week was the 40th anniversary of her ordination as a nun. So hopefully she's paid that off. But I had these rubber bands around under my jeans. I wore some loose jeans. I had rubber bands so I could tuck the book in. It was all well planned, you know. Went very smoothly. So now I'm still, you know, working off that karma. So then I started reading this book, and you know, a couple of things rang true. For, you know, some karmic bells were struck, you know, and it sort of started like that. So I think then, you know, Mandala magazine, the magazine of our organisation. I remember the last one or two issues, but many of the previous issues have had a series called The Road to Kopan. Kopan is our main monastery where all this started, in Nepal. So a lot of the students, older students, explain how they got there, what led them there. So everyone has a different story, you know, of someone they spoke to, or a book they read, or something they saw, or, you know, it started, in most cases it started because people were just in India or Nepal and they heard about the course at Kopan, you know, one way or another. Maybe they saw a flyer in a hash shop, you know. So why were you asking?
Well, I guess I'm wondering if what the part of the experience of this life before meeting the Dharma, what that's all about, I guess.
That's just working off some other different karma, you know? I mean, now you'll see that there are third generation Western practitioners. I mean, they may be little, but you know, a lot of the children of the Dharma students who met Tibetan Buddhism 40, 50 years ago are also quite strongly into the Dharma. So they were born into a Dharma family. Yeah. So they had it from the moment they were born. And their kids too. Others, like probably most of us, were born into some other kind of family, and we had to sort of wait for our own karma to ripen at an earlier or later date, you know. And as I say, it just ripens in all these different ways. It's amazing, really, when you listen to all people's different stories. of how they got involved in Dharma, especially some of the earlier ones where it wasn't so easily available in the West. There weren't Dharma centres in the West. Pretty much you had to go to India. There was a Tibetan Lama, Geshe Wangyal, who came to the States in the 50s, actually before the exile and everything. So a lot of people studied with him, Jeffrey Hopkins, Robert Thurman, people like that. So they didn't even have to go to the East to meet the Dharma. Most of us in those days did, however. There was not much in Australia. Tibetan Buddhism wasn't. I don't think there was any Tibetan Buddhism in Australia until Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa went for the first time in 1974. And then, so being there at Kopan for a few years and with these courses and more people coming, you see that, and everyone having their own story of how they got there or why they were there and so on. Some people left after 5 days, 10 days. Some people went the distance, a 30-day course, but then they completed it just because maybe they're the kind of person who wants to complete what they start, but then they went off and did something else. Other people, it took very quickly and they've never left it. So there's all these different levels of karma too. It's not just a question of coming in contact, it's what happens then. And some people met it and then they went off and they studied, they became professors, and then they're professors of Buddhism but they don't even practice. But they make a good living from it. So in this life. So I think each of us has our own story.
So Nick, I think the confusion that I had was not remembering some of the teachings on what goes with us when we pass from this life. And so...
Well, again, we may not consciously remember. We don't remember even the first few years of this life, let alone past lives. And most of us don't remember even some of the things that happen today. So, or we certainly won't tomorrow. So, but, as I was saying, when I read this book, for example, there's something, when I was reading about emptiness and karma, there's something stirred here, in my heart, and I had this thought, this sounds like it could be true, and not true in the sense that an anatomy textbook is true. Although one of my friends, when we were medical students, found, I think, 350 mistakes in Grey's Anatomy. Not the TV show. Probably a lot more mistakes than that. But the anatomy textbook, that was pretty amazing. They corrected them and they even mentioned him in the next edition. But and he was top of our anatomy class. But true, not in that physical sense, but true in a deeper way. So, and it was a kind of a strange, I never really experienced it before. So I noted it and didn't act on it that much immediately. But that's the level of remembering, I think. Something sort of sounds, for some unknown reason, it sounds familiar, I think you'll see in other cases, prodigies, like musical prodigies, it's all over YouTube and everything, 3-year-old amazing guitar players or pianists or Mozart, you think about it. It's not hard to imagine that's the continuation of a mind that was very adept at that skill in the previous life, and it's like an immediate continuity. Maybe for many of us there are several intervening lives, so we're not that good at anything when we're born, as some of these prodigies are. So the memories aren't as fresh. But and I think there's, but there are a lot of there was a guy, a professor at the University of Virginia called Ian Stevenson, who wrote a book called 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. I think he was more convinced than suggestive, but I think suggestive was what his publishers probably insisted, or the university insisted on putting there, you know. And he wrote subsequent books where talking about children who spontaneously recall past lives and describe them in great detail, and they're tested and so on, you know. Now there's another professor there, I think Ian Stevenson's probably dead now, but there's someone else I saw interviewed on TV recently, or read about somewhere, I can't remember now, who's continuing that work. There is some evidence out there, children. So these are people who died and were again reborn human, which is not easy to do, and which is probably why it's as rare a phenomenon as it is. And I think because of the, you know, prevailing culture, a lot of children who would talk about past life memories, their parents would say, "Oh, don't be silly, you know, you're imagining it," or would dismiss it, especially in the West, you know. So, and then after a few years it kind of fades. There's one YouTube interview doing the rounds of someone who remembers being a pilot. You've seen that one? I've seen it too, but I can't remember it very well. I'm pretty blasé about these things now. But if you search YouTube for pilot remembers past life, something like that, you can see this guy's story. This guy or this child's story?
It's a child.
This child's
It's
story.
about 10 or 11.
Yeah, it was like the Second World War pilot or something. Yeah. So, you know, there's stuff out there that's hard to explain in any other way, but it's a continuity of the same consciousness. Yet, people are falling over backwards to find some other explanation, you know, other than the obvious one.
So when I find something that's easy to understand, some of the teachings that are more easy to understand than others, and then I read something and it just seems bewildering to me, could that be because I've understood it in the past and I'm now just trying to understand it?
Yeah, definitely could be, yeah. I mean, that's a logical explanation. Like I say, there are a lot of people who bend over backwards to find another one, which they might or might not succeed in doing. But, you know, there are also stories of monks, young monks, 3, 4, 5 years old, who could pick up a text and just hold it to their heart. And then, without having even opened it, could recite the whole thing because they'd memorised it in previous lives. I haven't seen that, but there are stories like that. You know? And of course, you know, with incarnate lamas, they, you know, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for example, you know, they have a very profound understanding from an early age and can teach in great depth even in their teens, you know. So, again, you've got to think that comes from your previous life's experience. You know, this, you know, the whole path to enlightenment is contained in the teaching on the Perfect Human Rebirth. So, you know, we haven't even scratched the surface of it here. But, you know, I think if you wanted to learn more about yourself and how to make life meaningful, I highly recommend this book with the usual full disclosure.
One quick question. I've gone through about half the book, and I find it quite fascinating, particularly the 10 endowments. And it sort of drove home for me, like, how, yeah, that's sort of happening right here, right now. At least it feels that way for me in many ways. One question, though, I think it's, I don't know if it's which number it is, but being born at a time where the teachings are complete,
Mm-hmm.
I think if I'm saying it properly, from my limited view and what little I know, it seems like they're complete now, but could they still further develop? They could still further develop, can't they? So it really is complete at this moment, or?
I think that,
Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah, I think that may be referring to, there are two, the teachings are kind of divided into two.
Mm.
There's the written teachings, that we see in books, sort of the, what you might call the dry, sort of intellectual written word, explanations. And then there's the living, experienced realizations of the teachings that exist in the minds of accomplished practitioners, like our teachers. So that's the real teaching. That's the, in maybe 1,000 years' time, maybe the Dharma will have completely died out. There won't be any practitioners, there won't be any Dharma centers, there won't be any lamas, There'll just be the books in some libraries or on some computer disk or whatever the hell they have in, whatever narak they have in 1,000 years' time, Who knows? And maybe Google will invent some kind of contact lens with the whole teaching written on it. But and you'll be able to read those things and it won't be very helpful. It won't really allow you to practice. You maybe think it's quaint, these beliefs, I don't know. But, so, the real essence of that point is that there are still people with the experience, living experience of having practiced and realized and understood the teaching beyond the words. And so when they teach, or when they explain, they have a power that comes from their mind, from their realization beyond the words, that can be transmitted to the students, can inspire the students. So I think that's the key to that particular point. And that's a fact of being alive now, is that there are still teachers with this living experience, realization of the teachings, who can help us understand and practice. Okay, I'm sorry, I think our time's up. You could probably structure a whole year's teaching on just this book, because it really contains everything in it on the whole path. So I think it's very worthwhile to study and meditate on the teaching as is explained in the book here. Okay, so as I said, Geshe-la will be back here next week. He arrives on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Tuesday evening. So I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to do the abbreviated one?
Sure. Please
have some concluding prayers.
turn to page 39 of the prayer book. Just getting Mandala offer.